The year is 2030, a time that once seemed distant and filled with promise, now shrouded in uncertainty and tension. The world watches with bated breath as the news channels broadcast a constant stream of updates, each more alarming than the last. Teetering on the precipice of a global conflict of unimaginable proportions, the international community is gripped by a sense of impending doom. Long simmering tensions in Europe and Asia, which have been brewing for decades, are now boiling over into open conflict. Fueled by unresolved disputes and a resurgence of nationalism, these regions are becoming flashpoints for potential war. The political landscape is fraught with heated debates and military mobilizations, signaling a readiness for confrontation. The intricate web of alliances and the rapid proliferation of advanced weaponry, including AI-driven systems and hypersonic missiles, have created a volatile situation. These technological advancements, while impressive, amplify the potential for a catastrophic confrontation, making the stakes higher than ever before. Military parades showcasing the latest weapon systems are not just displays of power, but stark reminders of the destructive capabilities at the disposal of nations. From the Baltic Sea to the Taiwan Strait, the flashpoints are numerous and volatile, each with the potential to ignite a larger conflict. The geopolitical landscape is a minefield, with numerous conflict zones that could easily escalate into full-scale wars. Russia, under the iron grip of an increasingly autocratic regime, seeks to reclaim its lost empire, its gaze fixed on the vulnerable Baltic states. The echoes of the Soviet Union's past ambitions are being revived, with strategic plans being laid out to expand its influence once more. The Baltic states, small yet strategically significant, find themselves in the crosshairs of a resurgent Russia. In Asia, a resurgent China, driven by its own ambitions of regional hegemony, flexes its military muscle, its eyes set on Taiwan. The Chinese military conducts frequent drills and displays of power, signaling its readiness to assert control over Taiwan. The tension in the Taiwan Strait is palpable, with both sides preparing for a potential showdown. The world has witnessed this dangerous dance before during the dark days of the 20th century. The echoes of the 20th century's devastating wars serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of unchecked aggression. The failure of diplomacy in the past has led to unimaginable suffering and loss, a lesson that must not be forgotten. The stakes have never been higher, as the spectre of nuclear annihilation hangs heavy in the air. The potential consequences of miscalculation are chilling, with the threat of nuclear war looming over every decision. The spectre of nuclear annihilation hangs heavy in the air, a chilling testament to the potential consequences of miscalculation. The path ahead is fraught with peril, with every step potentially leading to disaster, yet amidst the storm clouds gathering on the horizon, a glimmer of hope remains. The international community, recognizing the shared peril, must seize every opportunity for dialogue and de-escalation. The alternative, a world consumed by conflict, is too horrific to contemplate. The international community, recognizing the shared peril, must seize every opportunity for dialogue and de-escalation. The alternative, a world consumed by conflict, is too horrific to contemplate. The alternative, a world consumed by conflict, is too horrific to contemplate. The alternative, a world consumed by conflict, is too horrific to contemplate.
The Baltic region, a geopolitical tinderbox for decades, explodes in 2030. This area, with its rich history and strategic importance, has always been a focal point of tension between East and West. The three Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, have long been wary of their powerful neighbor to the east, Russia. Their membership in NATO was seen as a shield against potential aggression, but in 2030, that shield is put to the ultimate test. Russia, citing fabricated pretexts of ethnic discrimination against Russian speakers, launches a lightning invasion of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. The Kremlin's propaganda machine goes into overdrive, painting the Baltic governments as oppressive regimes that mistreat their Russian-speaking minorities. This narrative, though baseless, is used to justify a full-scale military assault. The speed and ferocity of the assault catch NATO off guard, despite years of warnings from analysts and policymakers. Military experts had long predicted that the Baltic states were vulnerable to a rapid Russian incursion, but the sheer scale and coordination of the attack leave NATO scrambling to respond. Meetings are convened in emergency sessions, and the alliance's rapid reaction forces are put on high alert. Russian tanks roll across the borders, their advance spearheaded by sophisticated electronic warfare units that cripple NATO's command and control systems. These units deploy advanced jamming and hacking techniques, disrupting communications and sowing confusion among NATO forces. The initial phase of the invasion is marked by swift territorial gains as Russian forces push deep into Baltic territory. The Baltic skies are ablaze with Russian fighter jets, their dominance challenged by a valiant but outnumbered NATO air force. Dogfights erupt over the region, with both sides suffering losses. NATO pilots, though outnumbered, display remarkable bravery and skill, managing to inflict significant damage on the Russian air fleet. However, the sheer number of Russian aircraft gives them a temporary upper hand. The Baltic Sea, once a symbol of European integration, becomes a battleground for submarines and surface warships. Naval engagements are fierce, with both sides deploying their most advanced vessels. Submarines lurk beneath the waves, launching torpedoes at enemy ships, while surface warships exchange volleys of missiles and gunfire. The sea, once a conduit for trade and cooperation, is now a theatre of war.
NATO, bound by its Article 5 commitment to collective defence, responds with a combination of military force and crippling economic sanctions. The alliance's military response is swift, with troops and equipment being mobilised across Europe. At the same time, economic sanctions are imposed on Russia, targeting its financial institutions, energy sector and key industries. The global economy feels the shockwaves, with stock markets plunging and energy prices soaring. US troops stationed in Europe as a tripwire force are immediately deployed to reinforce the Baltic front lines. These forces, though initially small in number, are highly trained and equipped with the latest technology. Their presence serves as a deterrent, signaling to Russia that any further aggression will be met with a robust response. Additional US forces are rapidly airlifted from bases in the United States, bolstering the defences. British and French warships steam towards the Baltic Sea, while German and Polish troops rush to bolster the defences of their eastern neighbours. The commitment of these NATO members underscores the alliance's unity and resolve. Joint military exercises, which had been routine in the past, now take on a new urgency as these forces prepare for the possibility of direct confrontation with Russian troops. The world holds its breath as the two nuclear-armed powers engage in a high-stakes standoff. Diplomatic channels are flooded with urgent communications as world leaders seek to de-escalate the situation. The spectre of nuclear war looms large, with both sides aware of the catastrophic consequences of any miscalculation. International organizations, including the United Nations, call for immediate ceasefires and negotiations. The spectre of a wider European war, a conflict that could easily spiral into a global conflagration, looms large. The borders of the Baltic states become flashpoints, with military convoys and fortifications springing up overnight. Civilian populations are caught in the crossfire, with many fleeing their homes in search of safety. The international community watches with bated breath, hoping for a resolution but preparing for the worst. The initial Russian offensive, aided by its element of surprise and sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities, achieves significant territorial gains. Cities and towns fall under Russian control, with local resistance quickly overwhelmed. The speed of the advance leaves little time for NATO forces to organize a coherent defense, and the situation appears dire for the Baltic states. However, NATO's resolve, bolstered by the unwavering support of its member states, begins to stiffen the defense. Reinforcements pour in from across the alliance, and defensive lines are established. International support rallies behind NATO, with countries outside the alliance offering aid and condemning Russia's actions. The tide of the conflict begins to shift as NATO forces dig in and prepare for a protracted struggle. The conflict settles into a bloody stalemate, a war of attrition fought in the air, on land and at sea. Both sides suffer heavy casualties, and the front lines become a patchwork of contested territories. The human cost of the war is immense, with soldiers and civilians alike bearing the brunt of the violence. As the world watches, the hope for a peaceful resolution remains, but the reality of a prolonged and devastating conflict sets in.
As the conflict in the Baltics rages, a different kind of war unfolds in the digital realm, a cyber warfare offensive of unprecedented scale and sophistication. This unseen battlefield is not marked by physical destruction, but by the silent, invisible hand of digital sabotage. The stakes are high, and the consequences are far-reaching, affecting not just military targets but civilian life as well. Russian hackers, backed by the full resources of the Kremlin, unleash a barrage of cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure across Europe. These attacks are meticulously planned and executed, aiming to cripple essential services and create widespread disruption. The hackers operate with impunity, shielded by state support, making it difficult for international authorities to hold them accountable. Power grids are crippled, plunging entire cities into darkness. The sudden loss of electricity not only disrupts daily life, but also poses significant risks to public safety. Emergency services are overwhelmed, and the lack of power exacerbates the chaos, leaving citizens vulnerable and afraid. Banks are paralyzed, their systems thrown into disarray, causing widespread financial chaos. Transactions are halted, ATMs are rendered useless, and people are unable to access their funds. The financial instability ripples through the economy, affecting businesses and individuals alike. Hospitals are forced to operate on backup generators, their life-saving equipment rendered useless. Critical surgeries are postponed, and patients in intensive care are at risk. The healthcare system, already strained, struggles to cope with the additional burden, putting lives in jeopardy. Communication networks are disrupted, sowing confusion and panic among the civilian population. People are unable to contact loved ones, access news, or receive emergency alerts. The breakdown in communication further isolates communities and hampers coordinated responses to the crisis.
NATO, caught off guard by the ferocity and sophistication of the cyber offensive, struggles to respond. The alliance's traditional military strategies are ill-equipped to deal with this new form of warfare. As they scramble to adapt, the cyber attacks continue unabated, exposing vulnerabilities in their defenses. Cybersecurity experts work around the clock to identify and neutralize the attacks, but the damage is already done. The sheer volume and complexity of the cyber attacks overwhelm even the most advanced defenses. As they race against time, the experts face an uphill battle to restore normalcy and prevent further breaches. The cyber attacks, designed to sow chaos and undermine European unity, have a devastating impact on morale and public opinion. Fear and uncertainty grip the population, eroding trust in institutions and leaders. The psychological toll of the attacks is profound, leaving a lasting scar on the collective consciousness. The cyber warfare campaign extends beyond Europe, targeting NATO members and allies around the world. The interconnected nature of global digital infrastructure means that no nation is immune. The attacks ripple across borders, affecting economies, security, and daily life on a global scale. The United States, heavily reliant on digital infrastructure, finds itself in the crosshairs. The attacks expose critical vulnerabilities in national security and economic systems. As the nation grapples with the fallout, the need for robust cybersecurity measures becomes more urgent than ever. Attacks on financial markets, transportation systems, and government agencies disrupt daily life and erode public trust. The cascading effects of these disruptions are felt across all sectors, highlighting the fragility of modern society's dependence on digital technology. The cyber warfare front highlights the changing nature of modern warfare, where battles are fought not just on traditional battlefields but also in the digital realm. This new frontier requires a re-evaluation of defense strategies and a greater emphasis on cybersecurity and digital resilience. It underscores the vulnerability of even the most technologically advanced nations to cyber attacks and the potentially devastating consequences for civilian populations. As the world becomes increasingly digital, the need for comprehensive cybersecurity measures and international cooperation becomes paramount to safeguard against future threats.
The conflict in the Baltics triggers a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. Millions of terrified civilians, fleeing the fighting and the threat of Russian occupation, stream across borders into neighboring Poland, Germany, and other European Union countries. The sudden influx of refugees overwhelms existing resources, straining social safety nets and testing the limits of European solidarity. Temporary refugee camps, hastily erected to accommodate the displaced masses, quickly become overcrowded and unsanitary. Food, water, and medical supplies run dangerously low. The trauma of war weighs heavily on the refugees, many of whom have lost everything: their homes, their livelihoods, their loved ones.
The refugee crisis reignites long-simmering tensions within the European Union. Some countries, grappling with their own economic woes and wary of social unrest, resist accepting their share of refugees. Others, driven by humanitarian concerns and a sense of European solidarity, open their borders and mobilize resources to assist the displaced. The refugee crisis becomes a defining challenge for the European Union, testing its unity and its commitment to humanitarian values. It exposes the deep divisions within Europe on issues of immigration and national identity, divisions that threaten to undermine the very fabric of the European project. The international community, facing an unprecedented humanitarian disaster, scrambles to provide aid and support, but the scale of the crisis is staggering.